I would like to thank our sponsors, Brooks Institute, and of course, I have to mention Lynda.com, our presenting sponsor, thank you so much for her generosity. So let's start right away with the directors panel. From the Academy Award nominated, Academy Award Best Animated Feature, Brave, Mark Andrews. Excellent. Best Documentary Academy Award nominees, Searching for Sugarman, Malik Banyello. From the Oscar-nominated Beast of the Southern Wild, Ben Zetlin. From the Academy Award-nominated Silver Linings Playbook, David O. Russell. From the Academy Award-nominated Wreck-It Ralph, Rick Moore. From the Academy Award-nominated Les Miserables, Tom Hooper. And please welcome the editor of Peter Bart. The editor of Peter Bart. No, the editor of Variety, the man who's owned this panel for many, many years, and we're extremely grateful for him, Peter Bart.
I'm impressed that everyone is here. Driving through the fog this morning, I didn't know I was coming to Santa Barbara or Downton Abbey. So this morning, folks, we're going to be dealing with 9 filmmakers and 8 filmmakers and 9 films, or 9 filmmakers and 8 films. I've got to count. 1. We'll be swerving from the bayou to Polynesia, from Victor Hugo to the world of AIDS, and from the hilarious bipolar human wreckage invented by my friend David O. Russell to the world of Wreck-It Ralph. In short, this panel will be a study in incoherence. And on the other hand, if you're looking for coherence, you wouldn't be interested in movies, would you? So what I'm going to do is ask some initial inane questions, and guys answer them or feel free to take issue. Then I'm going to turn over to the audience. And as you know, year to year, everyone is free to ask anything, provided that you are not pitching a script or are not looking for the meaning of life. So, Mr. Hooper, it's good to see you again, Tom.
Thank you.
The question that all of us, at anyone, would always turn to you and say is that you hit it big with what seemed to be a tactically simple picture, which was a huge hit. And then you launched into what surely was one of the most complex movies made in the last few years in Les Mis. So what instinct of masochism caused you to make that decision?
This is a very public arena to discuss my relationship with my own masochism. So, so I'm pleased you started in such an easy place. And it's it's lovely to be in Downton Abbey talking in this very personal way. I don't know. I mean, I like your use of the word. The King's Speech was tactically simple. I do remember, 2 years ago, going through the award season, and you'd read articles talking about the cynicism of the King's Speech as being an obvious Oscar-winning film, and I thought back to the process of making it, where no one really knew anything about us, because we were making a film of an unproduced play based on some diaries discovered in a North London attic that no historian had ever read. So it was a story that no one knew, and none of us at all predicted or foresaw the journey it went on. But I suppose what happened after, with the King's Speech, I spent 6 months traveling with the film, and I was very touched by how it affected people personally, and how it was an emotional journey for a lot of people. And you know, I had no idea the number of recovered stammerers there were in the world. I had no idea that the extent of this problem, the number of people who came up to me, even people I knew. I mean, there's a wonderful director called Tony Kaye who came up to me towards the end of that, kind of going, you know, I'm famous for not speaking on the phone to people, and everyone thinks it's my eccentricity, but it's because I have a terrible stammer, and my stammer comes out when I'm on the telephone. And Tony Kaye was a director I really admired growing up. When I was a kid, he was, you know, the kind of legendary commercials director, and he's now a great movie director as well. But it was it was interesting how many people had connected with this. So I suppose I was just looking for I was looking for a story that could continue this kind of connection with people. And I was working with the writer Bill Nicholson on another project, and he said, "Oh, I've been asked to adapt Les Miserables," and you know, I thought about the fact that this is a musical kind of famous for its emotional connection. I mean, you know, people go back to it again and again because it offers the opportunity to re-experience these strong emotions, and so I started a journey of exploring it. But I must admit, when I went to see it, thinking about it as a movie, I mean, I felt like I was being drawn to it like a moth to a flame, you know, because I could see in front of me all the pitfalls as I watched the show, and I could see the difficulty of adapting it. But at the same time, I had this very visceral connection to the story, and you know, in the end, I wanted to do it because of the way it moved me, and what moved me about the musical was the end, the death of Jean Valjean, and the way the death of Valjean is handled. And it reminded me of something my father said to me a few years ago. He said, "Coming into old age, I want to master the art of dying well." And I asked my dad what he meant, and he said, "Well, when I pass away, I want to do it in a way that's as loving to all of you as possible, and I want to do it, you know, paining you as little as possible, and leaving you loved, and that's my mission, you know, for my you know, final time on Earth." And I thought about this as I was watching the musical, and I thought, well, the extraordinary thing about the way Victor Hugo handles the death of the central character is that he looks death square in the face. Death isn't a move in a computer game. It isn't a kind of empty ballet. He looks at it properly, and he says, here's a way to navigate it, because the hero, you know, is there with you know, he's surrounded by the girl who he loved. He's rescued the boy who loves her, so he's leaving knowing that she's loved. And the story has this ability to transcend the pain of death and give you a feeling of hope in that darkest moment. And Victor Hugo's point is, you do it through love. And the novel ends with the line, "To love or have loved, that is enough. That is the only pearl to be found in the dark folds of life." So that's why I did it in the end, because I felt if any story that can kind of provide you a way of navigating through the hardest thing we all face is a story that interests me.
Thank everybody for...
Well said. On the other hand, Tom, you and I have talked about the fact that you see in the movie with an audience, and you'll see 6 people weeping, and one person sitting there saying, "Why am I watching a musical?" So it's an amazing divergent response. Talking about navigation, Mr. Moore, sir, I never understood how one navigates one's way through the animation business. I mean, you emanated from The Simpsons and Futurama. How did Wreck-It Ralph happen?
Well, number one, I'd like to say thank you for having me here today, and having animation directors on this panel today. I look at Wreck-It Ralph as a milestone in a very long journey that began as a child for me. I was someone who was very lucky to know what I wanted to do very, very early in life. I was voracious for animation when I was a child, and the first movie I saw was an animated film, and as a 5-year-old, I knew I wanted to be part of whatever that world was, you know, as much as I could kind of wrap my head, you know, around what that meant. And that passion was almost kind of a magnetic north. Through my life, I always knew that I was on the right course. Whenever my road to a career that adults would say to me as a kid, well, you know, do you think you can make money at this? You know, is this something that you can, you know, sustain yourself doing? And as I was growing up, the industry of animation was not in good shape. So I was kind of, this was almost a fool's errand, you know, what I was chasing after. But and I think it's the siren song of every creative person that want to be, well, maybe I should do something normal, you know, that I think would have surely kind of ended me up on the rocks of the shore, you know. So I always kind of followed this passion for animation, and I was lucky enough to find myself. I grew up in this area. I grew up in Oxnard, so driving here in the fog, it reminded me, oh, this is Oxnard in the winter, you know. And it was kind of it was because I had not been back to this neck of the woods in a long time, so to have the fog kind of everywhere, it's almost kind of dreamlike, and I became kind of emotional coming here today. So because I spent a lot of time in this town. And I was lucky enough to find myself at CalArts that has an animation program in Valencia. So I've really gone far in life, from Oxnard to Valencia to Los Angeles. My journey is wide in scope.
On the other hand, George Lucas came from Modesto, so they had really...
That hick. So I found myself amongst a family of people that had the same passion, you know, and CalArts was almost a kiln for us, that we were kind of fired, you know, in this this oven, you know, of people with similar passions. And when we graduated from that school, many of us went into films, and some of us went into television. Those that went into films were kind of the founding fathers of Pixar, and my journey took me into television, where I worked with Jim Brooks on The Simpsons, and we were really launching out into an industry that by all indications or all appearances was dead, you know, that not a lot of animated films were being made, and on television it was mostly half-hour-long animated commercials for toys and breakfast cereals. So, but I'm a believer in the truth that if you put a lot of people with passion for something, inject them into a system, that change will happen. And I feel that we were in the right place at the right time, just as there was an interest in this kind of arcane medium. And animation is the home of... Directing we're all control freaks up here, but animation directors are the control freaks of the control freaks, right, that can control the performance down to the frame, and we often do.
And you can change things once you're finished, which every feature director is jealous of.
I spent many a night working on The Simpsons, to be working with Jim Brooks and Matt Groening and Sam Simon in those early years. It was a fantastic education in filmmaking and comedy, and I was the bottleneck that my shows that I directed would have to pass through. So it was literally, controlling a performance. It would be as if you could step onto the stage and take the place of Hugh Jackman, and say, no, at this frame I want you to do this, so it was in that arena that I was able to kind of hone my craft.
So on the subject of controlling actors, I see David Russell sitting next to you, and the one question I would love to ask profound questions about silver linings, but I find when I saw the picture, all I wanted to ask was, Jennifer Lawrence, I mean, who is she? How did you get a performance that remarkable out of that really peculiar young woman? Could you tell us?
I don't know how to answer that. I know that, maybe there's a lot of ways to answer it. I think one way is that the right people play the right roles at the right time. If you are humble enough to keep working on something long enough, even through the frustrating parts, as I'm sure everybody on this panel can attest. So I wanted to start that project 5 years ago, and so I thought other people would play those roles. But those 5 years were meant to deliver me to Jennifer. Also Bradley and Robert De Niro and Jackie Weaver and other people in the cast. And I also rewrote it many times. And it's a personal story for me,
Explain the connection, would you? Because I know the bipolar issues are important in the Russell family.
I must say you're in top form today. Well, my mom was probably bipolar. God rest her soul. She died about 12 years ago, but she was an Italian-American Catholic girl from Brooklyn who sort of just kind of white-knuckled it through her mood issues. And she's a very passionate, wonderful woman, as many bipolar people are. They're very passionate, very alive. And I got wonderful things from her, including the rhythm of speaking and her family and the passion for loving and life and when things fall apart and you feel like how you're going to get back together, and learning to keep love together through that was all from my family. And then my son reminds me of my mom. He taught me everything about my mom. I understand my mom in the rearview mirror better than through my son. It just would have been really rough to have my son be my mom. You know what I'm saying? Which did happen. So it's just much easier if it's your kid. But it's still challenging. So my kid who's 18 now, and he plays the kid who, with the camera who comes to the door, and I went through all these trials with him, and when Sidney Pollack gave me the book, I was looking for that story that could make him feel part of the world and say, look, it's not like you're over here and everybody else is over here, and be ashamed and don't show your face until you stop all that stuff. And, let's find the way that this is like everybody, because everything I learned from him is good for me and everybody I know. I think everything's bipolar. We picked the 2008 year of the Eagles because 2008 is the year that the economy collapsed. Our economy is bipolar, and people like Robert De Niro had to turn to bookmaking, which is, in sports, is bipolar. It's all, it goes up, it's down, it's depressed, it's ecstatic, it's manic, so all that made me put my heart into it for 5 years. And then that means I really had a deep feeling for it, And Sidney had said, how are you going to get the tone right? And I said, because I know it from the inside. I know that it's heartbreaking, and I know that it's also magical. And I'm drawn to what is magical as well, because you can't do the heartbreaking stuff for me unless I have the magical stuff, as well. That's the yin-yang of life, So Jennifer came to us at the last minute, at the 11th hour, as a Skype audition from her parents' home in Lexington, Kentucky, which I did as a favor to an agent, not thinking this girl who was too young, who I saw on the red carpet 2 years ago, looked like a Barbie, and I was like, who is that? And I'm like, that's the girl who's eating the squirrels in Winter's Bone. She doesn't look like that, She looks like Charlie's Angels right now, So. And I would also see Jackie Weaver out there, from Animal Kingdom. So, she just knocked it out of the park. She's a very special actor. She's a very, very special person who always gets on. She goes on, these panels and says, I never knew a character like Tiffany, who was so so bullheaded and so outspoken and so vulnerable. And I'm like, what about you? You know?
That's right.
You know, and I said that to her, and she was just like, you know. Anyway, that's my answer.
And just for the record, Jennifer Lawrence, I've spent time talking with her. She is a delightful character, and you never know what is going to come out of her mouth. And so, Ben, I've got to tell you, I expected sort of a grizzled, Bayou-like character, and instead I never met you. You made a picture for, what, $1.5 million, financed by a nonprofit, and you've spent the last 15 years of your life traveling the world, probably spending more promoting the picture than you spent making it. I mean, the business of getting behind and explaining a movie to the world, how have you survived this, and how many months has this been?
Well, the 1-year anniversary was at Sundance. That's when the film came out, so we just crossed that. But it's a crazy thing, you know. It's something that no one prepares you for. You know, you get all this advice about how to be a filmmaker and things like that. No one tells you that, you know, don't book anything for a calendar year after you finish a film. So it's, you know, it's a strange experience. You know, it's the longest period of time I think I'll probably ever go through without actually making anything. You know, I've generally gone one film to another, making shorts for the last 10 years. And so you get this weird creative gap kind of on the inside, which sort of hurts. But, you know, there's also a lot of, you know, it's a really interesting thing going from making a film that I really expected to show to 300 people, you know, down where we made the movie, to being able to take it around the world and sort of get a sense of how something that was very small and very personal actually resonates across nations, across continents, and sort of see the way that, you know, you imagine what you're communicating, even if you never think you're actually going to get the chance to see it happen. And so seeing the way that people react to the film all over the world is actually a really interesting thing. And going into, you know, in a month when I get back to, you know, making films is going to be interesting to kind of go back into the kitchen with it in mind that this is a meal for the planet, not just for my friends, you know, and it's an interesting thing to go through, and you know, but yeah, it's a strange, you know, I feel like there is a creative muscle that feels like can potentially atrophy from just talking about and analyzing your own work, and so you know, I've tried to keep on writing music. I write music in hotels at night, and that kind of revives me. So, you know.
But has it affected what you want to do as your next picture or the picture after? Now that you've seen the scope of the world audience out there, I'd read somewhere that you just wanted to continue making very small pictures. Is that still your desire?
Yeah, or you know. I mean, I think when you make a film, you want people to see it. So it's not that I want to shrink down, but you know, I think I probably went into this with a pile of 7 movies that I wanted to make in the back of my head, and you know, now I want to make the hardest one next, as opposed to, you know, I think what you're capable of with the leverage that you have, what you feel like, what movie you can go into and maintain creative control over has changed for me, and so I think that. But it is still, you know, it is still the movie that I wanted to make next is the one that I'm going to make next. And
is it a musical?
No, but it's going to be almost as hard as Les Mis, which is saying something. But
is it animated?
It's. I've been there. Yeah, no, I don't want to go back.
Wait, what did you do with animation?
I made animated shorts before. That was the first 2 films I did were animated shorts. You know, by myself in an apartment. You know, in a dark room, alone for years and years.
Hey, us too. Wow.
So cool.
Yeah. But I don't know. You know, it's. You know, I always think that you sort of have a. It's not about big or small. I think different people who make art have an either kind of. Some people, I just sort of have a digger's mentality. Like I want to I want to dig for my movies as opposed to just imagine something and then go out and, buy it or sort of just realize exactly what's in my head. I sort of like the process of trying to find something. And so, whatever your budget is, whatever the size of the film is, the kind of desire to go find people, find places, and put together a movie in that way doesn't really change. That's kind of just the way that I like to do it. So.
Right. Amen. So now, for the first time in the history of panels, may I confess, I have no idea who's sitting to your left.
He's great.
I don't know either.
This is a guy we met outside.
Yeah, I just sneaked in, I'm Malik Benjelloul. I directed a documentary film called Searching for Sugar Man.
Yeah. No,
Thank you.
so, now, may I say, I saw the documentary. I love your doc. I can't believe that just the perseverance in putting that together over time, and finally finding Rodriguez, who I gather wasn't that cooperative. Is that true? When you went at considerable personal cost to see him, did he stonewall you a bit?
Right, the film is about a man who didn't know he was famous. As an American artist who made 2 albums in the early 70s that were really good, but he completely flopped. He sold 50 copies. He started to work in construction in Detroit, not knowing that somehow these albums went to South Africa. And in South Africa, he became more famous than the Rolling Stones. That's basically the outside of the story. And one of the reasons why he didn't become famous in America was that he was performing with his back to the audience. He turned around when he was performing. And why? Because he was, I think, the most shy person I ever met in my life. If you take a step forward, he will back one step back. He has this kind of privacy around him that is, it's unheard of. He's really, really a private man. So the first time I came, he said, "Yeah, I can meet you, but you're not going to be able to film me because I don't do that." He said, and that's not very good when you're going to make a documentary film.
Now, when 60 Minutes ultimately came to him, what made him open up at that point? Because it seemed like a whole new person.
Yeah, the thing was that he's a kind, warm person. So if you just get him in front of the camera, he will be great. But the problem was to get him in front of the camera. So what I did was that I went back to Detroit every year for 4 years, and I got another 20 minutes of him in front of the camera. And then this year has changed. I mean, he was on Letterman and Leno and CBS 60 Minutes. And even, do you know what, even when he was on Leno, because on Letterman he did that, he tried to turn his back to the audience. So at Leno they put cameras behind him.
Well, it's a remarkable piece. I don't quite understand when you work on a picture, you have a studio behind you like Rich Moore, but how did you pay your bills pursuing this bizarre character who ran from fame?
It was pretty hard. I mean, the thing was that the main funder, when the film was almost finished and was going to give the grant, said the film wasn't good enough for the big screen. They wanted me to re-edit it to a 1 hour TV doc, and that's not very nice to hear when you've been working for 3 years, sitting on the same chair without getting a cent. So it was pretty hard, and the way we solved it was really to make stuff in a more simple way. I mean, we, for example, used Super 8 camera in the beginning, and Super 8 is pretty expensive. You need to, develop the movie and its expensive stuff. So I found this app, like a $1 app on the iPhone, which was pretty decent. So we used that.
Well, I admire what you did immensely. I know Ben was financed by a nonprofit. You are a nonprofit.
Yes.
Mr. Andrews, sir.
Yes, sir.
So the dirty word was mentioned by Rich Moore, Pixar. When Pixar, a Pixar picture, you imagine WALL-E, or you imagine Toy Story, or you imagine Up, you see the whole universe of animation changing. Is this going to be something that actually becomes an obstacle to Pixar pictures and to people who work on them?
Yeah, I mean, at Pixar we have, there are three things that when we do a picture that everybody's kind of concerned about. And it's kind of John Lasseter's rules for making a picture. The kind of things that he wants is, he wants a fantastic world that we haven't seen before. Okay, hard. All right. And then he wants, this fantastic character that we've never seen before. Okay, hard. And then he wants a story that's going to be heartfelt and touch everybody like they've never been touched before. Hard. So that's what you're rolling into work to do every day. And one of the things about animation in the process, and I've been on both sides of the fence. I've done some live action, I've done some animation too. So there's like lessons that I've learned from both. One of the things that totally pisses me off about animation is how long it takes to do, because we have to basically sculpt every damn pixel on the frame. I, unlike Rich, am not a control freak. Right? Just a little bit when it comes to animation, just a little bit. But it takes a long time. But in that time that it takes, we get this unique opportunity to make the movie umpteen millions of times. So we storyboard it. We do our whole editing process. I mean, record our own voices. I was like the voice of Fergus in the scratch recording. You all right out there? You fine? So I have an awful Scottish accent, but it works okay. So we put up the movie several times and look at it and go, oh my God, this thing sucks. We can't release this. And what's wrong with it? And we pull it down and we talk about it, we go over scenes and stuff like this, and we try new things and all that kind of things until we get the movie, and then we kind of start making it. So in that process, you can really realize the world. You can really get into making that character unique. You could really find that emotional story because we've road tested it umpteen million times on ourselves before we release it to the audience. And hopefully, we've done it and the audience feels the same way.
Yeah. Well, the whole business of taking a picture out and testing it, I know even David with your film, that must have been an amazing journey to see how audiences respond, or how even Harvey Weinstein responds. Were they surprised you tested a lot, or did you just say, look, this is my picture, let's take it out there?
No, I think one of the best things I've learned is to not be precious about the work, and I'll take a note from anybody, and I will do anything to try to make it better, and I just have faith in the process, and that includes audiences and Harvey Weinstein. So, there were moments where Harvey came in like Hurricane Harvey, and, we just battened down the hatches, and we got some great notes out of that. A few people got killed, but, it's a movie, so there's going to be some people who die. We did test it, and we learned a lot from those previews. You learned an enormous amount, because we were trying to calibrate the tone, of the emotion and of the performances. We had shot it several different ways. Bradley Cooper, who was a revelation, and part of those 5 years for me was getting to know him as a man and knowing that he himself had suffered through great emotional trials and transformations, and that he had none of that had been put up on the screen. So that's a great gift to me as a filmmaker, like with Amy Adams or Christian Bale in The Fighter. I say, I'm going to surprise people with this, and there's going to be a lot of doubting Thomases, and go ahead, bring it, come see the movie. So I'm very proud of Bradley Cooper, and he also had Robert De Niro had a chemistry with him, and Mr. De Niro personally wanted to do the picture, but you have to calibrate that. We had very dark takes. A much darker movie could have been cut from this, and so that's part of the process everyone up here is talking about. Yeah. It's a living organism, and our first preview, the lights went out in the middle of it in El Segundo, and so then there was like a 15-minute intermission. Well, first the light bulb was like fading through the first half of the movie, and I'm like, all right, you can't see their eyes, so okay, I'm just going to kill myself right now. And then the lights just went completely out. Like God was like, oh, you didn't like that? Try this. How's this now? No lights. All right. So everybody gets up and goes to the bathroom, and you're just like, and Harvey's there, and all the bosses are there, and then you know, people are going to the bathroom going, really good movie, I like your movie. And so, and then it turned out to be our highest scoring preview. It's a very strange process. But you listen to the focus groups and you learn things that you like and you go towards those things, you know. You find out, I almost always learn about where people really want to enjoy themselves, especially if you give them pain. And you go into the pain, and you make them very uncomfortable, which the movie does several times. And one of the things I love is that at the beginning, and I saw it with the hometown crowd in Philadelphia, they're like, Bradley Cooper, our hometown boy who's from here. Bradley That's not Bradley Cooper. I feel very uncomfortable right now. So that happens for about 15, 20 minutes, and then we have to win them back, honestly, in a new... We shatter their idea of him, then he gets reborn, which is, you know, it's neat. And then when they want to laugh, when they want to enjoy and embrace, which is this exuberance and love that's under the whole thing, you know. So that's what we learned from these previews, is feeling that heartbeat with an audience.
See, I don't think audiences, I think the biggest misconception, I don't think people realize that you have one movie that you shoot and then the whole process changes in the editing room. I remember John Schlesinger telling me after he shot Marathon Man that he emptied, in the dentist scene with Dustin Hoffman, he emptied theaters at 2 premieres before he realized you can't shoot a dental scene that way. But I should imagine with Les Mis that as you showed it to audiences that there were times when you thought it was too dark in some places or not. I mean, what was that process like in post-production?
Like David, I find the process of screening the film, you learn a huge amount from, and the fascinating thing about film, because you're making it for the audience, is everyone's view is meaningful. You can't kind of go, yeah, but you're not my audience, so I don't care about your view. And I think one of the great challenges of directing is to remain open to hearing the things you don't want to hear. Because you're always receptive to the note that's kind of the one you want to hear, but it's the note that fights something that's too, I don't know, that's too tough, that you need to remain open to. And I always start the first people who ever see my film is my brother, my sister, my mum, and my dad, and they always see my films first before any producers, although I shouldn't say that. And they're very tough, and because they're family, they don't. They see no need, particularly my brother sees no need to celebrate me in any way. And that's healthy. But the thing I learned on Les Miserables was through the process of testing it and showing it, which was most fascinating, is that early on there was a feeling from people that it wasn't as emotional as they were expecting it to be or thought it should be, and I discovered that when you're making a musical, the great temptation is that when it's on film, is you actually use up the emotion before the song happens. There's a scene in Les Miserables called Little Fall of Rain where Eponine has thrown herself in front of a bullet to save Marius, and she's dying at the bottom of the barricade, and Marius discovers this, and they sing together, and she passes away, and it's a very beautiful scene. And my editor Melanie had cut this really beautiful sequence of the girl lying in pain, and Gavroche goes up to her and strokes her hair, and the whole world goes into a kind of strange otherworldly place, and Marius is busy doing other things and eventually notices her, and it was a beautiful bit of cutting, and then he comes over and then they sing, but somehow the song didn't have much emotion, and I discovered in the end that what you have to do in a musical is you have to be incredibly savage about the build-up to the song, so that the audience don't actually have time to have the emotion in advance of the song, and the first moment they have time to have the emotion is in the song, so that in the case of this scene, we now cut very, very fast to the moment of Marius coming over, so that when he starts to sing, it's the first moment you go, oh my God, she's dying, and the emotion about her plight coincides with the music. So the music then elevates, heightens, and processes and takes you on the journey of that emotion. And you can't allow the audience to have the emotion in advance of the song. And it was the same in all, in almost every case that I had to go back and make sure that we weren't using all the advantages of filmic grammar to process a moment, so that people had the emotion before the music
Well, I can
started.
appreciate that, Tom, because I lived through the worst musical ever made, Paint Your Wagon. I remember when the audience realized that Lee Marvin was about to sing, you could see the, oh, fuck you, all over the theater.
No, but I must interject for one moment, because one of the best episodes of The Simpsons, did you work on that one? Is when Homer thinks Paint Your Wagon is going to be like a shoot 'em up, because Clint Eastwood and Lee Marvin are in Paint Your Wagon.
That's right.
So he's like, this is going to be a good bloodbath, and he's like, and then when they sing, he's just horrified.
That's right. It's true. So now, Ben, I want to go back to you, because when you, again, took your movie out, and people would say, well, is it a drama? Is it a comedy? I mean, what did you say? I mean, did you say, no, it's an epiphany? I mean, because the movie was not describable in one word.
Yeah, I still can't do it. Honestly, after a year of this, I don't have like the, it's this meets this. And I think that was one of the really amazing things about how the film actually got made, because, I mean, one of the lessons you do sort of get, I went to sort of, before I made the film, I was sort of launched into, I did the Sundance Labs, and we would go to these things where people that make films would talk to you and say, if you can't fit what your film is on a business card, you'll never get it made. And we were at such a loss. We were talking about the film and like watching this sort of haze appear between us and the people listening. And I think eventually at that pitch meeting, we just started pitching A League of Their Own. We would just say, it's 1942, all the men are away at war, who's going to play the baseball? And then it was like, oh, wow, yeah, that sounds like a movie. I mean, that I think is to a real credit of the people that paid for this movie, is they didn't make us do that. And the film isn't that, and so many of the films that you go to see in the theater that aren't good, are bad because you could explain it on a business card. And what we did was, these guys called us on the phone. They saw my short. They said, we love your short. Are you going to make a feature? And of course, when someone asks you that, you say, yes, of course, yeah, I've got it written. They said, well, tell us what it's about. And he said, well, we really can't explain it over the phone. Will you come to New Orleans and talk to us there? Which gave us 3 days to figure out what we were actually going to tell them. And we took them out to a bar, and we stayed out till 3 a.m. talking about what the film was going to feel like, that it was going to be this, that it was going to have this adventurous quality, but that it was a very personal movie, and that it was going to sort of give you hope and tragedy and, exist in this space that isn't genre-ish. And over the course of the night, we had a good enough night together that we thought, okay, we understand each other. We don't know exactly where this is going, but let's go do it together. But that's because these guys were making their first film, producing their first film. They'd never done it before. They are younger than I am, and it was just this kind of burst of energy. And I still don't know how to boil the film down, honestly.
Well, what I take away from all of you really is that the one common denominator is, to a large degree, everybody in this room broke the rules. In other words, I would imagine that in each case when you said to your agent or your parent, this is the movie I'm going to do next, whoever it was that was your self-anointed advisor probably told you that you're out of your mind. Is this the way you conduct your life, Tom? I can see you doing it.
It was very funny, because I rang my wonderful agent, Doug, when I was thinking of doing Les Miserables, and I excitedly told him about it, and he went, yeah, well, it's difficult for me to advise you because I just don't happen to like movie musicals, And so you kind of go, oh, that's great. So the one person who's meant to be able to give me some good advice has basically declared himself against the entire form. But then it's interesting, because then you kind of go, why? Then it starts to make you think, why is there this sort of ghettoization of the moving musical audience? Why are there people for whom they just say the form doesn't work for me? And actually that comment that Doug made made me become kind of really interested in how I could break down that barrier, and I became convinced that the tradition of lip syncing to playback was the thing that kept a certain audience away, because you know, sometimes I mean, I've had this feeling when I've even watched some musicals where you feel a little embarrassed, you just feel just a sense of kind of shame when they sing, and you know, I think it's because it's fundamentally, you know, not real at a time where the medium is becoming, you know, with very skillful filmmakers, more and more able to be convincingly real. And so I realised that in the end, the central challenge of making a musical is you're creating an alternative universe where people communicate through song, and you have to make it convincing. And everything is about how you get people to accept this, in order simply so you can tell a story through that form. You know, this is all done so that you can then just get people to forget about the fact it's a musical and enter into the story.
Now, we do have an obligation to open things up to people, to you folks down here.
I'm sorry, Peter.
And,
must be tough here.
So I'd love to hear from you, if you would like to. I guess there are mics on either side. So I welcome questions and arguments. Sir, you are first.
Mr. Hooper, as per your last comment, were you at all nervous that the other big musical of the last 50 years, Phantom of the Opera, hadn't done particularly well?
I was, until I saw it.
No, he didn't.
Good question and good answer. Sir.
Hi, my question's for Malik. The story itself is pretty interesting, and the character, but how do you find that story? How do you dig that nugget out of the ground, I guess, is because it's a pretty obscure tale.
It was actually quite a hard work. It was fun work. I quit my job at the Swedish television. I'd never done a movie before, and I went backpacking for 6 months with a camera looking for stories, and I found 6 stories on that trip, and this was just one of them. And the way I found it was that I was reading articles for a month before. I was just sitting in a house reading articles, and that's the most boring thing in the world. You literally fall asleep when you do it. I try to do it right now. I can't, because I fall asleep. But the thing was that I had this reward. I knew I was going to go on this 6 months travel, so then it was much easier. So I think I need to do that again. I had to get myself a reward.
Lacey.
Hi. Thank you all for being here. Tom, the director's choice in doing the number of close-ups with the amazing set designs, etc., how did you boil down to that choice of having so many close-ups?
I think it was because I wanted to see the singing as, I wanted to shoot the singing as if I was shooting dialogue in a normal movie. I wanted to see the singing as our dialogue, and because if you're saying, let's imagine a world where people communicate through song, I wanted to approach that with the same attention to detail as you would when you shoot a normal film, so that's one point. I think the other thing is, I suppose if you take Dream to Dream as an example, which is all, it's shot on a relatively long lens, and the background's fairly out of focus, and it's all about her face. I think it's because most of the songs are not about the environment where the person is in. So I mean, if during Dream to Dream you cut wide to show her in this sort of rotting ship, that doesn't illuminate what she's saying. What she's talking about is this man who deserted her, the impact that's had on her, the descent that's resulted from that, the shame, the intense shame she feels having been forced into prostitution, and it's a song about the extinguishing of the hope and the hardening of herself to carry on, in order to protect and love this child. And I felt the best guide to what the song was about was Annie's face. I mean, the geography or the physicality of the surroundings was not a guide to it. And I think quite often, the songs in Les Miserables are almost like prayers. They're people in relationship. They're almost, you know, Russell had this idea that Stars was a prayer that he was basically singing to God, and so I thought about the songs as if they were done in the form of prayers, and very few, you know, most of them are about a connection with something that's not physically there. Whereas in most films, when people, you know, there's more of a relationship to the space. And then in a song like Empty Chairs, Empty Tables, you know, we do cut wide because he is in the actual cafe where his friends died, and we do need to see the space. But ultimately, it comes back to what David and I were talking about with audiences. It came out of the democratic process of testing the film. And, you know, with Dream to Dream, I originally had a wide shot that tracked into a close-up over the course of the song. And it was Eddie Redmayne who came in one day and said, "Why aren't you using the big close-up? You're using the teaser trailer. It's so powerful. You see all the muscles in Annie's neck as she's straining, and it's so moving." And we put that in, and you know, suddenly the scene made people cry. Suddenly it completely transformed, and so it was a process of making the film more emotional. But also in the end, you know, what the best compliment you can pay to an actor is to spend 4 minutes without a cut on their face.
And you notice when most actors get to direct their first movies, they spend a lot of time focused right on their face.
David, I wanted to thank you for your kind words about Philadelphia. And I'm wondering, yo, Philadelphia. I'm wondering if Abscam's going to be shot there.
I think she's talking about the next picture, and they ran out of tax credit money in Pennsylvania, so no. But Boston has a lot. And just memo to Pennsylvania, come on, get some more. Me and Bradley went to the governor's house. I don't know. We loved Philadelphia. We put as much detail into our movie. The world is as important to me as the story. So what they eat, what they wear, the music they listen to, that's as enchanting to me as the story. When I watch Raging Bull or any picture, I could watch that and listen to them talk. So that was very important to us. And we added details that affected the script throughout shooting, from the neighbors and everyone there. So I would love to go back to Philadelphia, and if you're from there and you can write a letter to the governor, that'll help us out. And thank you.
Well, I just had to come up and talk to you, David, because, and thank you for making the film. I grew up with a bipolar mother, and I'm a therapist and an actress, and this is the most realistic, lovely portrayal where you have taken people who really have a stereotype of being off the map, dangerous, and someone you don't want to know, and bringing this lovely portrait to the screen. And it's the most realistic, lovely portrayal, and I'm an advocate, and I just wanted to thank you for doing it. It was very moving. It's my favorite film.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is for all of you. When you're directing, what's the most common mistake you find actors making in general?
I didn't hear the question. Could you ask it again?
When you're directing, what's the most common mistake you find all actors making, or just in general?
Ben, you should answer that.
Okay. I don't know. It's so individual, I think I think probably the most, if you're gonna make a blanket statement, if an actor is thinking about somebody watching their performance later, they'll do things that they think that somebody wants to see, and they're taking themselves out of the present moment of the scene. So I think the most basic thing that we would work on constantly is just being present, listening to what's being said, reacting to what's happening, and that's what you see. That's where you see a performance go off the rails, is when something happened. You're in a scene, and that fell down, and the actor is like, when do you not look at this having just fallen down? You're not present. So I think presence and listening and being in the moment of the scene is probably the most consistent thing. I mean, every actor has their own issues, but that's the most consistent thing that you have to work with, I'd say.
I'd say just doing a musical, to generally turn in the direction of the camera is a good idea. I had a cast with an extraordinary number of musical theatre stars from the West End in London. I mean, there were, you'd sort of walk on set and Russell would kind of go, oh my God, there are like 3, Olivier Award-winning actresses in the chorus, but there was this, weird tendency where, the camera would be here, and they would be busy acting this way, and the camera's still here, and you just kind of go, it would be fantastic just to kind of angle it a little bit. and I've never had this problem on a film before. Like normally, film actors, they're pretty in love with the camera, but.
And Russell didn't sing so bad. he caught a lot of. He caught a lot, but he didn't sing so bad. Hi. Next person. Thank you.
Ben, I was really amazed by the performances in your movie, and I know that Covenzi Wallace was like 6 or 7 when you guys were filming, and Dwight Henry was a really inexperienced actor. So I was curious when you got the confidence in them, that like where you knew that they could pull off the role, and how you sort of helped them get there.
One, I mean, you don't know if they're gonna, you don't know if you're gonna pull off the movie, especially making your first film. I mean, we really thought that we were driving an airplane directly into the mountain for most of throughout shooting and editing. When we cast them, it had as much to do with who they were as people, not because they're similar to their characters, but Covenzi was a phenomenon. I mean, when we found her, we had seen 4,000 people and we had never seen anything like that. I mean, our original plan with that role was that we had a girl who lived on the island where we shot the film who was sort of this wild child that, you literally drive down the island and she'd be, playing in the swimming pool, but her swimming pool was like a garbage can, and we made friends with this girl, but she couldn't act at all. And when we found Covenzi, we realized, we have an actress who's this age, and so that was one thing. But for Dwight, who had never done this before, he just has this incredible confidence, and he runs this bakery that's across the street from where we were doing the casting, and just seeing him at his bakery, everybody sort of knew him. He almost was on stage behind the counter, and you just see the way that people gravitated towards him and his presence. We felt like he had the kind of emotional landscape in his life to be able to channel into the film, and we felt that he had the confidence. And so, it was a 4 or 5 month process of teaching him how to act, and channel that, and it was really hard. But I just believed in his belief in himself and his commitment to anything he was going to try to do. So I think those are the 2 key things that made us decide to go with a non-actor for that role, which wasn't the plan originally.
Thank you.
Hi, my question is for Tom. I loved the King's Speech, and I wonder, when you're working with such phenomenal talents as Geoffrey Rush and Colin Firth, do you ever feel, even though you're the director and you're kind of the boss, did you ever feel sort of intimidated with these powerful people on, well, I would like this or a little of that? How do you feel as you're in that process?
It'd be very hard to be intimidated by Geoffrey Rush and Colin. They're very, very sweet people. I think I learned a huge amount. I'd actually answer by talking about Helen Mirren, who I worked with quite early on in my career twice, and I learned a key thing from Helen, which is that you can kind of have a whole plan. Whether Helen will walk on set and you go, okay, you're going to be staring out the window at this point, and the camera's going to track over here, and I've laid the track, and at this point, on this line, you're going to turn around, and she kind of gives you one of those looks, and goes, really? So, let me tell you how I was thinking of doing the scene. And then you kind of go, oh shit, her idea is way better than my idea, and and what a shame I've already laid this track, and let's put it up and start again. And what I learned from her is to value the idea of creating in the moment. Your actors would have always, well, quite often have thought more deeply about the minutiae and the specificity of their roles, and thought about every word that they're saying, and had more time to do it sometimes than you have. And it's really good to be open to the contributions that people bring. And a good example on Les Miserables was Russell, who turns out to be a fantastic partner in storytelling. And there's a scene in Les Miserables where Russell takes a medal off his tunic and places it on the body of Gavroche. And that was all Russell's idea. And because Russell said the great challenge of this story for my character is how to justify the descent at the end. And he talked about the fact there's something about the death of a child that cuts through political philosophy, law, what you've got in your head, and there's something extraordinarily sacred about the death of a child that has a different power. And and he wanted that to begin this process of unhinging and process of guilt. And that's what I find incredibly exciting, is to be open to the ideas that actors bring, and allow them in to become, partners in storytelling. And I know, as I've heard David speak before, that David also talks about the extraordinary amount that you can learn from actors if you're open to it. And so I think I've learned to become a better listener. But as a result, my camera style is very fluid. I don't storyboard, I don't pre-plan. I always invent it in the moment after rehearsal.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much.
And I think if a star tries to intimidate David, he simply punches them out. What time are we supposed to wrap, folks? Are we out? Anybody know? Say it again, 11:15? Oh, good. Okay.
Okay, so now I'm gonna come back to that, because it's a cheap shot.
Yeah, it's old news.
It's old news. First of all, I would never hit anybody in my life. That was a misreported story. First of all, it happened during the Clinton administration. Second of all, George Clooney and I are friends now. Third of all, I want every set to be a big, loving, safe environment, which is the only way I got 4 actors for the first time in 31 years to be nominated in every category. So my word to all the journalists and moderators who, show business, come on, you can do better than that. You don't have to hit low-hanging fruit.
My question is for Malik, but I think any of you certainly would have an opinion. You want to engage an audience in the story. In a fictional work, you can control the story almost completely, whereas in documentary, that may be more limited. So how, when you're approaching a documentary film, do you maintain that level of interest and development so that audiences don't feel too bored in a 90-minute presentation?
Right. I think in a way that when you do documentary, the writing is in the editing. So all the time you spend writing, you should basically spend editing. So I spent 1,000 days editing to try to get to that level. And the way I did, because you get crazy if you sit for 1,000 days on your own in your house, was what I basically did. Every week I invited a new person, like a random person. Could be anyone, like my grandmother or a 17-year-old cousin or anyone. Every week. So for 100 weeks I did that same procedure. And then you really know how every single scene actually affects, and if there's any places that drags, that, and you just take it away. And that's why you should really take, every film should be as short as possible, I think, because there's always a scene that's the worst scene. Take that away.
Okay. Good answer. Thank you.
Hi, my question's for David. I'm an Australian trying to be actress, and I've been watching Jackie Weaver for years in smaller Australian productions, and my question is, did you decide to cast her after seeing her in Animal Kingdom, or had you heard about her work previously, and what made you make the decision to cast an Australian actress in such an American sort of role?
Well, I think Australia's proven to be some great repository for much of American cinema, and I think it should make American actors try to step it up a little. She was wonderful in Animal Kingdom. And then I went back retroactively and saw her in Picnic at Hanging Rock, the great Peter Weir film, and all these other great films. She's a wonderful human being who has a huge heart, and every time, that's a tough role. It's a little bit like the Mark Wahlberg role in The Fighter. She holds the camera. She's present. Anytime the camera hits her, huge emotions pouring out of her eyes, and she's just a very real person who it's just taught us all, just made that house come alive. She was the pillar of that home, and I look forward to working with her again. She had a great humility and a great devotion, and became that woman in that Philadelphia neighborhood. She looks just like Bradley Cooper's mother. Bradley Cooper suggested with Robert De Niro that his mother play the role, and I said, well, has your mother ever acted in anything? And they said no. And I said, well, I don't think that's a good idea then. He's now pitching her for the next movie still. I don't know what it is. I'm not kidding. Anyway, so his mother would sit there and say, wow, Bradley, that's just like what happened in our house, So Jackie really inhaled the whole thing. And I think it's beautiful when someone who does a quiet performance, Robert De Niro once said to me, he's always afraid the quiet ones don't get acknowledged or recognized. But you can't have the big ones without the quiet ones. And it's all part of the same fabric. Thank you for your question.
We have time for just a couple more, so, sir.
For all of you, what is your philosophy of storytelling?
That's like the meaning of life question.
It's actually a good question. Who would like to start? Ben, you look like you're eager.
I was squirming.
In a way, we should ask our animation folks if they wish to chime in on that.
Oh, yeah, because it's so easy in animation, right? Right. We just make it up as we go along, right? It just works out for the best, right? Are you kidding? Stories, we have, there's a motto when I was doing storyboards and I was running my story crews like on Incredibles and Ratatouille. I made t-shirts that said story is hell, and because it is. Story is hell. It's the 666th layer of the abyss. Because you have one idea about what it is, and it's this organic beast, and it changes before your eyes, and you can't pin it down. And what Tom was saying, you have to be open to it. We were talking about the process and editing and find it and being incredibly open to ideas that can come from anywhere. And that's what it is. I think there's this misunderstanding that directors rule with an iron fist and that we know exactly what we want. Sometimes we do, but we're not right all the time. And it's being open and willing to try all these new ideas to make it better, and recognizing, I think, is the biggest thing a director needs to have, is recognizing when that's it. That's the thing that clues into this feeling that you can't describe, but that's what you want it to be, and you are able to plug it in and find it. And that's what we do. We find stories. We don't create them. We discover them. That's my perspective coming from animation.
Well said. Well said.
I would agree with that like the question earlier about mistakes being made and what are common mistakes. My job is not to dictate to the crew, but to listen, and if something feels like a mistake, that's my first clue to say, well, what's trying to be said here? This means something, and I think our process is to kind of sit in the discomfort of, well, maybe we're going down a blind alley, but maybe this is, this could be the thing that unlocks the story today, and to kind of sit in that and let it kind of wash over me as a director and kind of find, well, what's the value added, to the story, and not trying to push the story or make the story grow at my pace. I think of it as kind of a tree, that I cannot make a tree grow faster than it normally wants to grow. I have to kind of observe the tree growing, and recognize what's beneficial, to take from that tree, to add to the story. And our process is, 180 degrees different from the documentary process, where we're doing our story process is totally front-loaded, where we don't shoot anything until we have a blueprint, for that film, and then it goes into production.
Well, I think the common denominator of all of the filmmakers on this panel, in wrapping it up, is that each of you, all of you, defied the odds in getting your pictures made and in choosing the pictures. And what's exciting for me is the fact that all of these films were so successful and that you did successfully break the rules and defy the odds. So thank you all for participating. And thank you.